probably found yourself wondering why some construction projects run smoothly while others turn into complete disasters. And the answer comes down to risk management. Because if you can anticipate risk, you can mitigate risk. And I'm going to show you exactly how to proactively spot, assess, and handle the risks for any construction project. But first, let's start with an introduction to risk management. So, what is risk management? Risk management is the process of identifying, analyzing, and responding to potential uncertainties that could affect a project's objectives. It involves proactively planning to minimize negative impacts and to maximize your project's opportunities. But why is risk management so important today? Well, if you don't do your due diligence, things can get out of control and costs especially can really start to spiral fast, which in the worst case can lead to projects being completely abandoned. But it's not just about cost. We need to consider every single risk that could impact the success of a project, from the worker's safety to the supply of materials or even the weather. So if you're running your own construction project or working as a project manager on a development, it's your job to anticipate and mitigate all of the risks. And I'll be honest with you, it's a pretty thankless job, because if you do it well, then no one ever knows just how delayed or over budget the project could have been. And if you do it badly, you'll spend the entire project firefighting and trying to explain why the issue wasn't resolved and sorted before it had the opportunity to really start gaining momentum. Think of your project as trying to summit Mount Everest. Some people will try and get from base camp to the summit as fast as possible, regardless of the conditions. But the higher success rate comes from those who focus on slow, steady progress, managing oxygen, watching the weather, and turning back when it's not safe. Because it's not about one extreme push to the summit, it's about surviving long enough to get there. Remember, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. For your project, sure, you want to complete it as quickly as possible, but not to the detriment of the project quality or the site safety. So it's best to keep Murphy's Law in mind when you're navigating risk, and that is that everything that can go wrong will. And you need to make sure you're doing your best to have all the contingencies planned for. So now you know why risk management is so important to the overall project success. Let's move on to the first step in the process, which is risk identification. We need to know what the risks to our project are before we can plan ahead. So we need a list of potential risks. And where do we get this list from? Well, there are several ways you can come up with this initial bullet point list. First of all, do not overlook a simple brainstorming session. I personally like to use the inversion technique, which is a great mental model where you think of everything that could go right or all the tasks needed to complete a project phase, and you invert them to what their opposite and what their failure would look like. And then you create a plan around that. So for example, the project coming in on budget would be inverted into the project exceeding the budget. Now think of all of the areas of the project that pose a threat to this success. Things like professional fees being exceeded or construction costs being undervalued. Again, we think, what could go wrong? What could impact our overall success? What could drive prices suddenly? What could cause a shortage in materials? And what if a contractor goes bust? What if we find something in our excavation after we've already paid for the site? Now this is a true story. I remember when I was working on a project in the Middle East, and we were literally just about to start our construction on our main access road to the development when we discovered one of the rarest plants known to man, and the implications were we had to completely redesign the entrance to the development, which cost us time and money and all sorts of headaches. So we've actually developed a checklist of the 100 most frequent risks in projects, which is free to download in the link in the description. Use it as a guide, but always be sure to consider what is specific for your individual project. These are a great starting point, but flesh them out and see what you can come up with yourself. So your brainstorming session should capture the obvious risks, and the checklist will fill in a lot of the gaps. But once you've completed your list, run it through AI for good measure. We've created an AI super prompt that you can download for free that teaches any AI tool about your specific project to get hyper-specific answers. The link again is in our description, and tell it that you're uploading a list of potential risks for your upcoming project, and start by asking it to give you 10 more risks risks you may have missed and decide whether you keep going based on the quality of the answers and the actual answers that are relevant to you. Don't just create a list of 200 risks that could happen, because that's never going to get managed. So now your risks are identified, great, but just knowing a problem might occur isn't going to stop it from happening. And before we start managing our risks, we need to decide which risks need the most attention. So we move into step 2, which is risk analysis, aka figuring out which risks are the most pressing. See, not all risks are equal. Bad weather might force you to down tools for a day, but if you're in the US and most of your supplies come from Canada, a major wildfire could disrupt your supply chain for weeks. So we need to analyze our risks by essentially asking, how likely is this to happen? And how much will it hurt if it does happen? To calculate this, we use a basic scoring system, and we score on 2 things. The first one is impact. How damaging this risk would be if it actually happened. For example, what are the impacts on time, cost, quality, or our company's reputation? And the second is probability. How likely is this to occur? And both are scored on a scale of 1 to 5. And once you've got those 2 numbers, multiply them together and you get your risk rating. Higher scores mean a higher priority. Lower scores just need monitoring. So I'm not going to spend forever on examples here, because I've already made an entire video about this, and I'll tell you about that in just a minute. But a quick example is, if at the time of planning you're aware of a steel shortage, you would write the risk as steel suppliers are unable to meet demand. And you would score it as a 4 for impact, because we physically can't build without it. And you'd add a 5 for the impact probability, because we know it's almost certainly going to happen. This would give us a risk rating of 4 times 5, 20. So we now know we need to be focusing more time and attention on this risk, say, than if a client maybe wanted a small design change. Again, we have a free risk register you can download, and I've already made a video on demonstrating step by step how you can start to use it and start to populate it and start to managing it on a daily basis. So I'll post a link in the description so you can find the video and everything else you need right there. But before you do that, you need to figure out how you deal with these risks should they arise. So now you've identified your risk, you've analyzed and scored them. The next step is to actually do something about them. So step 3 is mitigation. And mitigation always comes down to asking 3 simple questions. What are we going to do about this? Who is responsible? And when will this be complete? For every major task, pick one of the 4 standard responses known as ARTA, which is A, avoid, eliminate the risk completely. Change the plan, the process, or the activity so the threat simply can't happen. R is reduce. Make the risk smaller or less likely. Add controls such as better planning or backup supplies or faster approvals, training or safety checks. T is transfer. Just simply shift the risk to somebody else. So that's what contracts are mainly for. The most common tools are insurance policies, warranties, penalties, or clauses within contract that make another party responsible for failure. A is accept the risk. If the risk is small and the cost of doing anything about it outweighs the cost that it would cost you to reduce it, acknowledge it, monitor it, and move forward. Remember, you don't always have to completely get rid of every single risk. You can move forward with your projects at risk. Just make sure they're monitored. Choose the right strategy for each risk. Document your decision and you're done. 4 options, 1 clear choice. Pick one and move on to your actions. What do you need to do to stop these risks from escalating right now? Always keep it specific and practical. Vague statements like monitor supplier risk won't suffice here. Actions should look like this. It should say something like source 2 alternative suppliers and confirm pricing of each, or resequence the program to avoid weather sensitive activities in January, like laying cement or bricklaying. Your action plan should be clear enough that someone else could pick it up tomorrow and know exactly what to do. Next, assign ownership. This one is pretty straightforward. For every action, you need one person who is responsible. And finally, add a target date. When does the next action need to be completed by to ensure the risk cannot intensify, it can't compound? This, along with the entire register, will need to be updated regularly. I personally do mine every week as the project progresses. Each time an action takes place, the risk will need to be updated, and hopefully the risk score will lower as you manage them. And there you have it, the ultimate guide to risk management in construction. If you do this well and stay on top of it, you'll finish your project with a long list of situations that you handled and didn't allow to escalate. Because anyone can point out problems, but the value comes from how quickly and how well you deal with them. And if you want our free risk register to use on your next project, the link is in the description of the video here. And you can watch that for a step-by-step walkthrough on exactly how to use it. And if you're new to real estate development and want an overview of the entire process from start to finish, the 9 stages of development, then watch this video here.